I got to learn how to work this thing. Hi, Wing.
Morning.
Come on in. How are you, bud?
Look at you. I love this. This is better than car karaoke.
Yeah, right? Hey, welcome to Locals Only. I'm Eric Hale, and if you don't know me, I'm the guy that founded Local Magazine 14 years ago in my garage. It's been my job for all those years to tell you the coolest places to eat in all of Southern California, fun things to do so you have date nights that aren't boring, and we've talked to some really interesting people. Now we have a podcast, and we're lucky enough to call this Mercedes-Benz EQE all-electric sedan, courtesy of Fletcher Jones Motorcars in Newport Beach, our mobile podcast studio. So sit back, buckle up, and enjoy the conversation. Welcome to Locals Only. Today, we take a spin through the mean streets of Orange County. We're going to talk with Wahoos Fish Taco owner, Wing Lam. He's going to tell us about his immigration from Brazil to California, and we're also going to find out about a party for John Wayne that may or may not have ever happened. So sit back, buckle up, and enjoy the conversation on Locals Only. How many stores do you have right now?
We got about 50 stores. Yeah.
Wow.
We lost a few during the pandemic, but we're here. We're here. We're on the other side.
That's good. At one time, did you have stores as far away as like New York and Japan?
We still have Japan. Japan remained. We lost New York. We lost Philly.
Okay.
But we have one in New Jersey. So that's as far east and as
cool.
far as west, depending which way you're looking at the map.
Yeah, I remember when you had the one in New York.
Yeah, that was great.
We actually you let me send our magazines out. So I mailed out a rack and some magazines. So we were only like a year into business and we had Local Magazine all the way in New York. So I thought it was pretty cool.
It was great. I mean, those guys, they did a great job opening, but then they forgot that, you need real employees to run it,
Yeah.
So it is what it is. You live and you learn.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
looking back, I think they would have wished that they would have followed the original game plan.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you have a game plan, but if I talk about you a lot, by the way, because I feel like you're one of the OG business guys from Costa Mesa. You started with you and your brothers, with Mingo and Ed, I think really small on a small loan.
Yep.
And just grew it into something that's, international, which not a lot of businesses have done from around here. A couple of the surf brands have, but I look up to you in what you've accomplished. And I think about when you say they didn't do it the way you wanted to. I don't think that, from what I've seen, the way that you run your company, there isn't a perfect way to run it. I feel like you guys are always making tweaks and changes. Every time I go to a menu at the original location in Costa Mesa, the menu board has changed because I feel like you're still trying to communicate new ways to talk to the customer all the time.
Yeah, we always, the thing is, the quality of the food is always, first and foremost.
Right.
But somebody's got to execute it, right? So at the end of the day, the reason, we cook and people like coming to us is the recipes, right? People execute. It's not like ready to serve food, right? Actually, somebody's got to make it from scratch.
Right.
And it's not that difficult, right? But you as a, customer that goes out frequently to retailer, to restaurants, you want to eat something that you can't make at home.
Right.
Because basically at home, I hate to say it, there's a lot of ways to cut the corners. You can open a jar, take something out of the freezer, taking something out of the prepackaged, I call it, right? Easy to do. Mm-hmm. Follow recipes 1, 2, 3, throw it in the oven, throw it in the microwave, throw it on the stove for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
And the difference between that and what we do is it starts with that raw tomato. Then you got to do things to it, right? It's still 2 or 3 minutes, but it's just, there's a few more steps, right?
And I think people probably don't realize this, but I've talked to you a few times over the years. This isn't a business where anything comes out of a can. It's kind of like a bakery where people get there early and they are prepping because you have to get everything ready for that day.
Absolutely. So when you look at like all the amazing donut shops around us now, they're from scratch.
Right.
Yes.
And again, nothing against the par baked or production. It's just that you can tell the difference.
Right.
So when you're bringing, I call it a box of donuts to everybody, then you don't have to spend a couple of bucks, right? But when you bring something like a treat, then you go to the $4 or $5 donuts, and there's a reason why they're $4 or $5, right?
Yeah, Sidecar, you're probably talking about.
Sidecar,
Sumter does a great job there. Perfect example that you feel like every ingredient is picked out on purpose, just probably the same way you pick out, the tomatoes that you pick out are the right ones and the avocados are the right ones.
Yes.
But they're made specifically like each day for you to consume. And I think that's special and unique.
Yeah. And that's the end of the day. When things are made from scratch, the consumer knows the difference and they appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that's, again, hourly employees, nothing against them, but they're much easier to follow 1 or 2 steps, not 6 or 7.
Right.
And that's only the difference. Yeah.
So I love talking about your food because I'm a big fan. Aaron, what's your favorite item? What'd you say?
Oh, always the bowl, why is it?
Bonsai bowl.
Bonsai bowl.
Yes.
Bonsai bowl. She's a bonsai
With
bowl
tofu,
person. I'm a
spicy
2-item
tofu.
combo.
Yeah.
Probably cheese enchilada and a fish taco. Pretty much go to.
Yeah.
I know my order.
Yep.
I think
Easy
everybody
breezy.
in Orange County probably knows
You
their
know
order.
your Wahoo's order.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Everybody's a creature of habit. They know what they want. They know what they
Yes.
like. And you don't want to try new things. The reason you go to a particular restaurant is for a particular dish.
Yes.
And again, there's lots of Mexican guys, right? But you go to each one for a specific item.
Right.
And there's some guys that make burritos better than others. There's guys that make enchiladas. And then you just have your go-to.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
So one of the questions that I want to lead into with that is about your success outside of Costa Mesa, right? I understand if you have a business and it was all around surf culture and having good things to eat right after you got out of the water.
Yep.
But how does that relate when you're going to places that aren't Costa Mesa, when you're trying to get that messaging across in Philadelphia or in some other market? Like, how does that work, right? Because here we know you, we trust you, and it's the kind of food that we eat. But you get to other places, they've never heard of Wing or Mingo or Eduardo, and they've never had a fish taco that's done properly. What's the secret sauce for Wahoos to be successful outside of your own backyard? Because I think a lot of businesses are in that growth mentality, and they don't know how it translates. How would you say that it does?
It's just like a surf brand, right? I would say that, I don't know, let's just say 50% of all surf guys that wear, let's say, any of the big brands, Billabong, Quicksilver, Hurley, and that, they may never actually surf, but they aspire. So it makes them feel like they're a surfer, when they wear that brand, right? So that's what we're really selling. It's like, hey, you may not live in California, you may never surf, but this is what it's like to go surfing in Mexico or Hawaii. And these are the kinds of local dishes you would get in these places, right?
Right.
So it's an aspirational, and that's what brands do. We tell a story, and it makes you feel like for that 30 minutes that you're in my restaurant in New Jersey, that you're in Mexico or you're somewhere on the beach in Hawaii. So that's a story we're selling, because you may or may never go to Mexico and surf.
Right.
But this is as good as being there.
I really love that.
Now, if for the people that haven't been inside of Wahoos, which is not many in Southern California, let me transport you there, because we have TVs with surf movies playing.
Yep.
We have more stickers than they probably, I don't even know where they get these stickers. Like, I think people make stickers just to put them up at Wahoos. But the whole walls are covered, the windows are covered, even the tables are covered. And you talked about that surf, that kind of brings you in there. You feel like you're in some shack just with a bunch of surfers. But you also did a good job of working with brands and working with personalities. I'm thinking, like, I'm not sure if I'm right, but I feel like Shaun White, Kelly Slater, and brands like Billabong and Hurley and a lot more. You even went the BMX and that way. So how did you get that tie in, and how did that happen? Was it natural, or did you have to work for that?
It was kind of natural, because, like I said, everybody that is stoked, right? Like surfing, I would say, definitely was the beginning of it. But surf brands sponsor snowboarders. They sponsor BMX riders. They sponsor skaters.
Right.
So it's just a natural for the team managers when they would bring in, let's say, a surfer like Kelly Slater. It would just be a natural for them to bring in a guy like Tony Hawk or Shaun White. It was just one of those where it was part of the action sports community.
Right.
And that's what we basically say. It started with surfing, and then slowly migrated into snowboarding and skating. And pretty soon you had inline skaters, you had BMX, mountain bikers, because the whole community talked about it having a place to go before or after their favorite activity.
Right. So you didn't feel like you had to chase them that hard. You felt like you did a good product that resonated with them, so they were kind of happy to support.
Yeah, because they figure, hey, surfers hang out with other athletes, right? So as soon as you're part of one community,
Right.
the other guys will embrace you. As long as you're part of one tribe, the other tribes are like, hey, maybe you ought to hang out with our tribe a little bit, right? And what happens here during the winter when it rains, a lot of surfers will stay out of the water because the runoffs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But when it rains, it snows.
Right. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So
you-
it's just a natural
When it
that
rains, it
you know,
snows. I love
yes.
that.
You know what I mean?
Let me just ask you about this, and this is a little
Yeah.
off topic.
Sure.
The look of Wing has been pretty much the same since I've known you.
Oh yeah.
How long has this been your iconic look? And I mean, this just doesn't change, right? This is
No, it's-
this is just your look.
Pretty much, I say about 30 years, right? Because
Yeah.
early on, it was the short hair and all that because I had just come from corporate America.
Yeah.
But as things kind of started evolving, I call it, I realized, I go, hey, you know what? I might as well like do one of two things. I say, you know, to kind of fit in the action sports spaces, either shave your head or let it grow.
Yeah.
I say, you know what? I kind of like my hair, so I'm going to let it grow.
I love it.
And then along with it, I'm like, I'm going to see if I can grow a Fu Manchu like my dad. And it grew. So it's just been a part of it, you know. So I'm the only one in the family that can grow a Fu Manchu. So it's kind of a little pay tribute to my dad. And the two of us, when we're together, we have a lot of fun, you know, and people are like, hey, you kind of look like your dad. I go, well, thanks, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right. I think I'm starting to look at like my dad the more I get older. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but
Yeah, we got to get there, you know.
let's talk about your parents, because this is something a lot of people might not know.
Yeah.
Is kind of where they got their start, because you have roots in the. Oh, there goes somebody really
Really
fast.
fast.
You have roots in the restaurant business. Am I right?
Yes, I do. So luckily for my parents, you know, they left China after, you know, World War II, the communists, you know, took over.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad kind of took off first. He went from, you know, China to Hong Kong to Japan and to Brazil. About 10 years later, my mom followed the route because she was basically told that all of my dad's friends had remarried along the way because their wives were stuck in mainland China.
Oh.
So my mom said, hey, if I don't, you know, and my oldest brother was about 10 years old at the time.
Okay.
So she said, hey, if I ever have a dream of seeing your dad again, I got to go all the way to Brazil. Otherwise, this is never going to happen.
Right.
So my mom did. She, you know, scrounged her way, borrowed and, you know, some money, and it was able to get all the way to Brazil without speaking a word of English or Portuguese
Really?
at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, talk about a single mom with a 10-year-old on a long, you know, slow boat from, you know, Hong Kong all the way
Slow
down to,
boat from China.
yeah, all the way down there. Literally, it was an old ship. You know, there wasn't a
Wow.
lot of airplanes traveling expense-wise, right? So the least expensive ways to get on a ship. So they did.
What year was this, do you think?
This is by the time my mom, this is late 50s.
Late 50s.
Yeah,
okay.
because my dad had left in the early 50s,
Okay.
you know, to Brazil, opened one of the first Chinese restaurants there. So that's why there's a gap, about a 10-year gap between my oldest and my second oldest brother, right?
Mhm.
So my mom reconnected and basically said, hey, do we want to do this together? And luckily for my dad, he said, you know what? Mom is a smart one. She can, you know, she was the only wife of all of my dad's friends that followed,
Yeah.
you know.
She was
And
determined.
she
That's
was
what
determined.
my wife
I
would have
think I
followed
might
me.
do
Yeah,
that.
she,
Right?
she wouldn't have waited that many years, though.
No.
She would have been in the next week's boat.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know the real reason why she waited that long. I don't know
Yeah.
if because it's for my brother to be a little older,
Yeah.
safer, whatever.
Right, right.
But they found each other in Sao Paulo, Brazil,
Aw.
reconnected, had a few of us, right? The more exact to be, there were 4 more of us, right? They managed to get it going. But by the time my mom got to Brazil, things had changed. My dad went from being one of the first Chinese restaurants in Sao Paulo to being one of many. Now there was a
Oh.
little
Okay.
Chinatown and the whole
Okay.
9 yards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people had left and made their way there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now there's a lot more competition. So my mom said, why don't we find another town that we can basically create a monopoly, being the first and only one.
Right.
Yeah.
So they literally moved, I call it about 8 hours away on a bus drive, Okay. So basically it'd be like going from about like San Francisco to
Yes.
San Diego kind of a
Right.
thing.
Right.
Yeah.
the other end of the state, a little farm town called Presidente Prudente, right? Which means President Prudente, which is a former president of Brazil.
Okay.
And they started, in the early 60s, another Chinese restaurant that was, pretty successful. And then right around, the late 60s, I call it around 67, 68, my dad thought, there might be a better opportunity in America. So he came first with my oldest brother who was going to school here. And they accidentally, one of my brother was dropping a coworker on Balboa Island of all places. I don't know how they ended up there. So I don't know if that's a real story or they just happened to drive by. And there was a restaurant location, business for sale on the corner.
Right there, there on Balboa Island, right there on the main street.
Right on the main street. And you're going to laugh. You know what restaurant that was?
What was it?
Olamendi's.
That was Olamendi's.
One of their locations because there's still the one in San Juan and all that. Again, very traditional. I don't know why that restaurant was up for sale, but for whatever reason it was up for sale, but with the property.
Right.
Not just the location. So dad calls my mom back in Brazil. They worked it out to where we did well enough to send them some money to buy the building. And they opened that restaurant in the early 70s.
And what was that? What was the name of it?
It was the Shanghai Pine Garden on Balboa Island, which is still there.
Which you can still see if you're on Balboa Island in Newport Beach.
Yep.
And if you go down the main street, as you come onto the island, it's going to be on the left-hand side.
Yep.
And you can still see it. Now, was there an apartment above it as well, too?
There was kind of like I call living quarters, right? The employees lived up there. And at one point, we actually changed it into like a banquet facility because I remember bussing tables up there.
Yeah.
But in that process, we call it, there's the moment that changed our lives. I call it forever.
All right.
So the restaurant was doing okay. I call it, at best, it was maybe running at 20% occupancy.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember Gloria Ziegner, the little socialite that did all the events, charity events for Orange County?
No, I don't think I was there at that time, so I don't want to say that I did. But a lot of people might remember Gloria Ziegner.
Yeah, she was a big socialite columnist that did all the events, all the charity events. She was one of those. There were about 3 or 4 ladies that ran all the charity events, covered them anyway.
Okay.
For Orange Coast Magazine, Orange County Register, LA Times, Coast Magazine, Riviera, all that. So she was part of that group. And she was just beginning her career at the time. And talk about a moment in time where she, being Jewish, said, oh my God, I love Chinese food, love my dad. He goes, can we do a little private party in your restaurant for my husband's birthday? So they did. And at the time, she had one big client, John Wayne's wife, Pilar Wayne, who's still alive.
Wow.
And she went to Pilar and said, hey, would you mind if you asked your husband to come by, stop by and wish my husband a happy birthday?
Wait, so just catching me up, this person, Gloria, asked John Wayne's wife,
who was her client at the time,
was her client,
to say, hey, can your husband stop by and wish
John Wayne stop by
and wish
to our Chinese restaurant
and wish my dad, because he lived on Little Island.
And at that time, John Wayne is one of the biggest celebrities in the world, bar none, right? In the early 70s.
Living in Orange County.
Living in Orange County. He's like literally one of the biggest celebrities in the world.
Yes.
And he's just going to do a stop by.
A stop by. But what came out of that was, the legend was that my dad hosted John Wayne's birthday party, which is not true.
Which is not true.
But that was the legend for the next 30 years until one day Gloria told us what really happened. We didn't know. In Brazil, we all like, hey, your dad cooked for John Wayne. That's all we knew.
Oh my gosh.
Which changed our lives because we were very set in Brazil.
Yeah.
Thinking that my dad got the bug to go to America. Now he's coming home because the restaurant is just doing okay.
Right.
Well,
but that was the tipping point, though. Was the rumor was the tipping point?
The tipping point created an empty restaurant to an hour and a half wait to get in.
There was an hour and a half wait to get into that restaurant.
Yes.
Because people thought that's where John Wayne would eat and had his birthday party.
Yes.
So it was a place you had to visit.
If you came to Newport Beach, this is where you might actually see John Wayne. Or by association, you would be at the restaurant that John Wayne ate at.
That is so cool.
Right?
So then all of a sudden this place is just busy and now Dad's not coming home.
Dad's not coming home. So if we want to see our dad again, we got to come. Last time, one kid goes to, from China to, Brazil.
Right.
Now, the four of us with my mom have to come to America.
You're just chasing your dad this
We're
whole
just chasing
time.
my dad, right? And more crazy is my dad needed free labor. That's really the real
Yeah,
reason, right?
right.
So all of us are of 13, 14 years old at the time.
Yeah.
We became the busboys, the dishwashers, the hosts. We basically ran that restaurant when we were kids.
Did they ask you a lot, like, when's John Wayne coming in, or when's the last
there
time you
was-
saw him?
Yeah, I don't even remember because I couldn't speak that much English. But it was really funny because I never met John Wayne, but the fast forward,
Yeah.
Ethan, Wayne, and I are friends today.
Wow.
And Ethan basically runs the Duke's properties.
Right.
He's got the whiskey. He's got all those things that are related to the family.
Right.
Marissa Wayne was running Grit Cycle, which is now changed name to another company, right?
Right.
So she does the fitness. So we're friends with two of the kids.
That is so
You know what I'm
weird.
saying? And more interesting is Gloria became an integral part of our Wahoos because the cornerstone of what we done is be a part of the community.
Right.
And we would run into Gloria once or twice a week for the last 35 years
Yeah.
until she passed away last November. But Gloria's son Mark and I are friends today, which is funnier than anything, right? Because and to be able to tell the world that the reason we're in America is because of Gloria.
Right.
Otherwise, we all be in Brazil, climbing
Having a Chinese restaurant
Exactly.
in Presidential Preferencia, or whatever you called it. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
So that's and Wahoos would never get started.
And I think that also probably speaks a little bit to Orange County. There's 3 million people here.
Oh yeah.
Right. And, inside that 3 million, there's a lot of different cities, right?
Oh,
but
yes.
when you boil it down start getting into Costa Mesa and Newport Beach and those
Oh, yeah.
areas where you guys started,
Yep.
It's a smaller community.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you're literally said the generations just passed down between family members, and
Yes.
now some of those people that your dad did business with, you're
Oh,
doing
yeah.
business with, which is really
Yeah.
neat.
And to be able to run into people that say, "Oh my God, that was my dad's restaurant," or "This is my kid's favorite," right?
Right.
One of those two. Because if you live in that Newport Mesa area, those are the two iconic places. Because if you were ever on the island, you couldn't help but to maybe have
Right.
Chinese food or
Right.
one of the Italian restaurants. More important, one of the frozen bananas, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's part of that ritual. And if you're in Costa Mesa, I mean, you
It's a
at
ritual.
one part have stopped by Wahoos.
Let me just, for our listeners that are in business, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about, like, you had a good pedigree
Yeah.
from your parents, whether they forced you into child labor or not. That's
Yeah.
that's yet to be determined. But you did have a good pedigree, and you had this ability to learn the business from them.
Yep.
And then they helped you get started, I'm
Yep.
thinking. But I mean, even if they helped you get started, even if you understood the business, to go from 1 to 50 or 1 to 60,
Yeah.
that's what everybody wants to know how to do it, because people understand how to open one donut shop, one coffee shop, one magazine. I know I talked to you before I went to my second market, and then we've got into, a lot of markets, but what is that secret of going from 1 to 2 or 2 to 10 or 2 to 50 or 60? What does that take? Is it just money, or
No.
what makes that happen?
It's systems,
Okay.
right? You got to be able to, because what's in your head, nobody else can see, right? So you got to be able to put it on paper so people can say, here's the playbook,
Right.
right? Just think of a coach, the NFL, think of all this stuff.
Okay.
These are adults. Why do they need a playbook? It's to make sure that everybody knows where to be and understand exactly how it's going to be executed. And think about it. These are professional athletes. Why do they still need a coach?
Right.
Because you need a playbook. So recipes, all that, it's not just because, it's so make sure that everybody's on the same page at all times. So the communication is key, right? So without my two little brothers making sure that always my crazy ideas, put it back on paper,
Yeah.
right? Because it's great to have an idea, but how do we replicate it? How do we do it over and over again? How do we deliver the same experience every day? Everybody's got to be on the same page.
Right.
So you got to have systems, and you got to have training. You got to be able to communicate, right? So it's one thing to say, hey, here's how you shoot a ball. The question is, it's easy to shoot a ball when there's not 50 guys in your face.
Right.
But as soon as you put 3 7-foot guys, how do you shoot that same ball?
Right.
And that's the thing, because you got competition, you got all these things. So how do you execute and always try to stay on top?
So when you have a plan
Yep.
and you practice your plan,
Yep.
it makes it really easy to execute it even under pressure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's the key. Just like professional athletes, you got to have a playbook.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for cruising with us today on Locals Only. I want to give a special thank you to Wing Lam for being here and sharing those fantastic stories. I want to thank everyone on the Straw Hut Media team, including executive producer Ryan Tillotson and our editor and producer Parker J. Hicks. And as always, a big thank you to Fletcher Jones Motor Cars in Newport Beach for providing this beautiful Mercedes-Benz EQE to be our rolling podcast studio. Join us next time on Locals Only, where you can buckle up and go for a ride in our mobile podcast studio with some of the coolest people in Southern California.